Well, welcome, Margaret, to the Save by Mother Earth podcast. How are you doing today?
Hi, thank you. I'm doing awesome.
How's the weather there in the UK?
It's coming up to an English summer, so we have rain some days and we have nice weather other days, and that's pretty normal in England.
Oh, nice. I'm located. We're always hoping for rain. So with all the forest fires and things like that are kind of going through, people are
Oh,
like, "Oh, we need the rain because we're not getting enough of it." But that typically happens in the winter, and then the
yeah.
summer's more dry. So well, welcome. I'm so excited you're here. And I know you specialize in herbs and medicinal herbs and kind of foraging and all of those kind of pieces. And I would love to hear more about your story of how you got to where you are and what you do.
Okay, cool. Um, so I mean, I'm herb obsessed, so I spend a lot of my time foraging for herbs, making things with herbs, treating people with herbs. I do forage walks to teach people about herbs. I've got online courses teaching people how to use herbs. So, and I just love herbs. Basically, everyone says the minute I start talking about herbs, I kind of light up and I just keep talking and keep talking. Everyone's like, "Yeah, Margaret, okay, that's fine, that's fine."
So how'd you get into it?
But yeah, if you would ask my parents, they would say as a baby, because when I was teething and crawling around, apparently I'd get into the kitchen and chew the garlic. And apparently you could smell me coming. I mean, as a baby, you could smell me coming. I mean, it's just garlic central. And it was only kind of when I was older, looking at herbs and plants and everything else, I found that actually garlic is great for sore gums and sore teeth. Now, I wouldn't recommend it for kids necessarily, but apparently as a baby, I knew what it was about. And I've always just loved being in nature, doing things in nature. And years ago, I went on a course by a herbalist. I mean, I was an osteopath at the time, so natural remedies and everything was big in my heart. And this woman gave this course, and I was there with my mum, and my mum came out and went, "Oh, that was really nice, wasn't it?" And I'm like, "No, my mind is blown. Just oh wow." So I did more and more courses and got qualified and experienced, and it just kind of kaleidoscope and just rolled up from there.
Wow, that's amazing. So when you say you work with different people around like herbal medicine, what might that look like?
It kind of depends on the person. I've got other qualifications as well. I mean, I was an osteopath, but I don't do that anymore. But I do emotional freedom technique, cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness coach, that kind of stuff. So it's normally all wrapped up in one. I find that having a multifaceted approach is usually better for people, because a lot of anxiety and stress is in our lives, and helping that to start with will help most symptoms and conditions. But it's normally a first therapy session and find out who they are, what they've been through, what medication they're on, what they've been on, previous conditions, and then choosing the herbs to help them. But it's not always the symptom treating. It's getting under the skin. It's really getting into the person and their condition. And then things like getting them to do mindfulness and some, sort of emotional freedom technique tapping, just to get everything else gone. Because if we're so stressed, it just takes so long to get healed. But if you can help people sleep better with herbs and different techniques and different sort of bits and pieces they can do, and then you target their symptoms and then you target the condition, you just get the health of the person back. So that's
Yeah.
normally what I do.
It's amazing when you really look at it about how there's things out there from Mother Earth that really do provide. And the indigenous people really obviously knew this, and shamans and the the people that have worked with it for so long. And I know in our country, at least in the US, we're so medical, like pill focused.
Pill
And
for all ill.
yeah. And so how do you how do you support somebody who is maybe they come from the medical field, or they've always been like, oh, I have to go and have this medicine because this is research based, even though some of that medicine came from the herbs that you're talking about, like willow, for example.
Yeah, exactly. I think it depends on the person. A lot of the people that come to me are kind of interested in it already. But if I'm talking to other people, it's planting seeds. A lot of the herbs these days do actually have a lot of science behind them, and some, sort of tests and studies. But kind of normally people come to me because they're slightly interested. And so therefore you kind of part way there, and then you can talk to them about how it can help them and what it helps. And they start getting a bit more interested. And especially if I can get a little bit of nature in there, I always love getting nature in there, maybe sort of taking them foraging and saying, this is the stuff, and just kind of getting in there and just Yeah, just lighting a little fire or planting seeds. Sometimes you have to plant seeds and it grows later.
Yes, yeah. Well, and I like that because if they're planting the seeds, right? And you're talking about the actual literal seeds, right?
No, my apologies. I kind of
Okay.
mean not planting the idea in their head. So sometimes
Okay.
I've always found as all different therapies, natural therapies, people are a bit not sure. But if you plant the seed, sometimes they will come back to you later because sometimes they'll go away and they will try all the other medication. And if they're on one medication, they'll need something else because of the side effects. And sometimes they'll turn up with me. And often, actually, I'll work with people who are on medication anyway. It's like, okay, let's work together. I'm not anti-medication at all. I mean, if I've tried willow bark tea and some other herbal teas and like a headache, I'll pop a paracetamol. That's fine. But yeah, sometimes it's kind of a case of just working with them on that and say, okay, let's support your body while you're going through this process. And maybe we can, over time we can work with your doctor to reduce what you're on. So yeah.
I think that's so key to make sure that to all the listeners out there, don't just go into the forest and start trying new things based off of things that you've read or going to the store. Like you want to make sure if you are on medication that there aren't any adverse side effects.
Absolutely. There's lots of herbs which you can't use on certain ages, or you can't use if you've got certain conditions or medications. A lot of the herb walks I take people on where I teach them to forage. It's kind of case, this is what this herb is. Don't use this herb if you've got this, and this. But if you don't have that, it's really awesome for this, and this is how you can use it. But it's just as important to learn when you shouldn't use a herb as when you should.
Yeah, when I was taking that foraging class, I was so excited about all the different things we were learning about. And then there were a few that were like, you can't use if you have a high blood pressure. And I have kidney disease. And so I have high blood pressure pretty regularly. And I'm like, oh, but maybe if I try this, I can get off this medication. But I was like, not obviously going to play with that at all. But it's really interesting to know that all those things are there. So I think what I really am loving to see is that there are some medicines now that are coming out with herbs included in them, even on over the counter. You're starting to
Yeah.
see things more where they're like, oh, this has calendula in it, or this has this, like it's starting to creep into the mainstream a little bit more. Are you
Yeah,
seeing that
which
as
is
well?
yeah, I mean, it's absolutely awesome. I was lucky when I was much younger. I had a doctor he was this fabulous Indian guy. And in the UK, I mean, our NHS is free. So whenever you go and see him, by the second patient, he's running late because you just gave everyone time. And he was chilled and relaxed. He was just, he was a unicorn as far as doctors go. And I remember I went in with PMT and he was like, why don't you take primrose oil for a month and come back and see me if you need to? And that was my first kind of, oh, okay, that's really cool. And I went away and took primrose oil and didn't need to go back. And I was like, that's awesome.
Right.
What a
Well,
wicked doctor.
right. And even the mannerism of like, you don't need to come back unless
If
you
you
need,
don't need to.
right?
Yeah.
Which is again completely the doctor I see right now, they want to see me twice a year, even though I'm seeing a specialist as well. And I'm like, that's only it's like all financial. Because you're just like, if I'm doing well and I'm seeing the other doctor in between who's also checking the same things you're checking,
Yeah.
it seems questionable, but it's I love this idea of being able to incorporate things into your everyday. I was doing a podcast the other day about if the woman the interview had said, if it's not good for you, it's not good for the environment. And I thought that
Oh,
was such
interesting.
a cool statement about like
Yeah.
what you surround yourself in. And like, so if you were going to share, like, what are some herbs that you kind of incorporate into your day?
Okay, so ashwagandha is a big one that I would include. Um, it's great to just buffer your body and your mind against stress.
Mm,
It's great. It's adaptogenic. It's fantastic. So it just kind of keeps things calm a little bit. I yesterday went foraging for elderflowers. Just amazing at this time of year. I mean, my hands were just covered in pollen. It was wonderful. And I've been drying those, and I love having elderflower honey in the evening. Teaspoon of elderflower honey in the tea before bed. It just really helps you calm and sleep really well. So yeah, that's one of my favorite, and it's delicious. Elderflower honey is just gorgeous.
have you had lilac water? That's like one of my favorite. I don't know. Do you have lilacs over there?
We do. It's something it's not something, it's not a flavor. I don't like the really floral, really kind of that level
Okay.
of floral.
There's something about it where I was just like, I had lilacs in the house before I moved, and I'd pick it and put it in the water for overnight or whatever. And it was like, it smelled the way it tasted, and supposedly it's supposed to be good for allergies as well.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of things that you can do that with. I mean, things like chamomile water, cleavers, which isn't a flower, it's more of a sticky weed. What's called sticky willy in England is by the kids. Not sure if the UK, the US get the willy bit, but putting that into water overnight is really great, and it's a great lymphatic tonic and helps improve your sort of digestion and just your health and everything else. It's brilliant stuff. But yeah, making a water is a really nice way of doing things.
Yeah. So what are some things that you would suggest if people have like common ailments? And again, for anybody listening, you always want to consult your doctor. We're going to say that right here.
Consult your doctor or herbal therapist, absolutely.
Or herbal therapist. Yes, exactly. So what would you suggest for things like if people have like headaches every once in a while, or like migraines, or stomach upset? I know I use
Okay.
like kind of apple cider vinegar and that kind of stuff pretty regularly. I have a shrub. I don't know if you call them shrubs there. It's
Yeah.
where you mix like the herbs and I'm actually having one right now with some sparkling water.
Nuts.
And I found it at the farmer's market, right? And that has apple cider vinegar for the stomach, like acid reflux and stuff like that. But what are some things that are common ailments you might see, and things that you suggest people might try?
Okay. I mean, so things like the headaches. You mentioned migraines, ginger. There's loads of studies that talk about ginger being fantastic for migraines, because ginger, it's got very few side effects or anything else. You can use dried, fresh, frozen. Just grate some into a mug, pour your boiling water over the top, just a teaspoon into a mug, and then when it's cool enough to drink, you just drink that. And scientifically, it's nearly as good as some of the migraine tablets out there.
Wow. Is it because it's anti-inflammatory?
It's massively anti-inflammatory.
Okay.
And also, it's great for nausea as well. Ginger is fantastic for nausea. So if you get any travel sickness or anything else, always say ginger. If you like ginger. You mentioned some gastrointestinal. So things like at the moment, I've been picking quite a lot of blackberry leaves, because at the moment the fresh leaves, they're quite soft, so they don't have as many spikes on the back. And they're actually really good for digestion and upset stomachs and that kind of thing, as well as things like sore throats and gum disease. And again, it's one that anybody can use, and my garden is overgrown with brambles right now, so I've got loads of them.
Right. It's amazing. It just amazes me all the time when you're just like, you could step, like you mentioned nettle, and my friend who's hiking the Appalachian Trail right now, she took a picture and she's like, oh, there's stinging nettle on one side and poison ivy on the other. And I was like, oh, stinging nettle makes amazing tea. Just don't get it mixed in with the poison ivy. But but stinging nettle, another friend of mine loves to make stinging nettle cake. Just
Wow.
all the flavors and stuff that come from it. But I like to have the stinging nettle tea pretty regularly.
I love eating it. It's fantastic. I think it's got more vitamin C than orange, more protein than soy, and more iron than spinach. I mean, it's a proper superfood. It's fantastic. So I make it in spinach or put it into curry or all sorts.
Yeah. So for the listeners out there, there's so much you can kind of learn about this. Again, you'll want to make sure when you're going out for the first time, you go out with somebody, first, second, third, fourth, however many times, to get like an expert. Don't just pick up a foraging book. You want to kind of go out with somebody that gives you tips of what things might look like.
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons I started doing my foraging walks locally was because I was out picking sort of various bits and pieces, and somebody was picking berries thinking they were elderberries, and they were actually dogwood berries, which are poisonous and would have made them violently ill. So I was kind of like, no. I know the berries are the same, but the leaves are different. Here, look at the difference in the leaves. And then I was like, yeah, I need to share this.
Yes. Yeah. And it can be some small changes, but small differences. But once you recognize them, you're like, oh, actually, that's a pretty big difference. I just didn't even see it.
Yeah. I mean, there are things called dead nettles. They're more like a mint, but they grow right next to nettles and they look really similar. And a couple of times I've been going to pick the dead nettle, which is, little white flowers. And someone's like, "Oh, no, 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 don't pick nettles without gloves." And I'm like, it's not a stinging nettle, it's a nettle, which is a great wound herb. But yeah, but I've got gloves for the stinging nettles.
Yes, it's amazing how some people don't get affected by the sting. But for me,
Yeah.
like amazingly, it hurt so bad, but it was right next to another plant that soothes it, right? I guess they grow together typically. I don't remember what it was. Plant, no.
Was it a dock leaf? A dock or
Dock, yeah,
yarrow
yeah,
or
yeah.
plantain?
Yellow dock. Yep. It's amazing
Do
how
you know
they,
that's not very good at it? It's not great at helping.
no.
You need to find out plantain. You need to find out plantain.
Okay.
Also known as white man's foot, often over in America.
Okay.
But yeah, that's great. That you scrunch that up and rub it against. But dock leaves, they're not as good an anti-inflammatory as, I think it's more, when you're a kid and you bang something and your mum rubs it better. It's that kind of healing from a dock leaf.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because I was wondering, it didn't really work as well as I thought it was supposed to, but it worked a little bit. It did ease it a little
Yeah,
bit, but maybe it was the
it's
rub.
got some anti-inflammatory, but if you really want to go for it, something like yarrow or plantain is the one you want to reach for.
Okay. So if the listeners are like, they're not ready to go out and forage or find things outside, what are some things, like you mentioned ginger, what are some things they might be able to find at like a grocery store or a health food store that might
But
be
and this is the thing. I tell you what, I'll include the link for you for the listeners. I've actually got a free course on kitchen herbs. It
perfect?
goes through all the herbs. Literally, if you go into your kitchen, you will probably have in your tea section in your cupboard, and probably that dried herbs at the back of your cupboard. Just check they're in date. They are fantastic. They've got so many medicinal properties, from your mint to your marjoram to your oregano to your thyme and rosemary and ginger and all of those things. They've got huge benefits. So they probably just need to go to their cupboard to begin with.
Yeah, and then it's pretty, it's safer to ingest because it's from your cupboard. It's from the store.
Yeah, you
But
know what it is.
exactly, exactly. So do you have maybe like 2 or 3 tips for the listeners of things that they could do today other than like going to your course? And what are a few things they could do today around foraging or medicinal herbs?
um, yeah. So, I mean, if you're going to go out foraging, always make sure you know what you're doing. So a really, really good book that details the color of the stem, the shape of the stem, the color of the leaf, and just go out and learn them. Don't necessarily use them until you're 100% sure, but just go out and just look around you. And this is one of the things I find in my foraging courses is I take people to a car park and I go, if you look around right now, you can probably see every single herb we're going to talk about, but I wouldn't pick it from where the cars go because the herbs will absorb all the toxins. So we then go out, but there's just so much out there. And once you start learning, it just sort of draws you in. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, by my feet are all these herbs that I can use. So go out and learn to identify them. And if you learn to identify them now when you don't need them, then you can learn to sort of when you do need them. I'm going to give you a recipe for herbal honey, because you can use the kitchen herbs as well. So get fresh local honey. This is the best fresh local honey, because local honey, if it's unpasteurized,
Like
it's
the
really
raw?
great for raw. Yeah, I think in the UK we're not allowed to call it raw anymore. I don't know why, but new legislation. But if it's raw, unpasteurized, it's really great if you get hay fever. A teaspoon a day is
Yeah.
great for hay fever. But if you get a clean jar, half fill it with herbs, squash down, pour in honey and stir it around, and then keep adding the honey and keep adding the honey. I use a chopstick because it's easy, because all of the herb has to be surrounded by the honey. Seal it tight, tight, tight. Because what you're going to do is every day is you're going to turn it upside down to shake it and keep it moving. Do that for 2 weeks and then just leave it alone for a couple of weeks and strain it, and you'll have delicious honey, absolutely delicious honey. So you can use, rosemary and thyme, and you can take it for sore throats, you can take it for immune boosting, you can take it for headaches, you can put it on parsnips before it goes in the oven to make it nice and crispy and delicious. And you can cook those herbs and you still get the properties. So that's another tip, is making herbal honey. It's so easy, so easy.
And how do you
Um,
strain it? Because that's one of the biggest things that
okay,
fit.
so I've got a nut milk bag.
Okay.
I'm sure if you Google them and you probably get them. So I just got one of those because it's easy and it goes in the washing machine and it just straight it through. You can use a clean pair of tights
Okay.
because that's nice and so just anything with a slight mesh will allow it to sort of pass through. So
Oh, that
something like that.
sounds so much easier than the other ways that people have been trying to do it, because it's just, and it feels like that's cleaner too. It's a
Yeah.
cleaner, easier way to do it. That's great. Um, and so we will definitely put the links. Are there other links that you would like to share of where people can find you?
Yeah. I mean, I'll put up the link for my website and you can just easily go in and find the online courses because there's a whole bunch of online courses. But yeah, you'll find the free one in there with the kitchen herbs, which is really popular. And
Wonderful.
it's crazy because I get people around the world looking at that coming back to me because mainly the kitchen herbs around the world are pretty similar. So, and I love the fact that, there's people all over the world reading this and watching it and coming back and going, oh my God, that's great. Now I can use these herbs in a different way and I'm taking less paracetamol. And, it's just really awesome.
Yeah, wonderful. And we'll put that in the show notes for sure. So anybody who's listening, feel free to go there and grab that.
Yeah.
It's been so great talking to you, Margaret. And I'm so
And you,
excited.
thank you.
I'm so excited to get this information out there because I think there's so much power in being able to kind of take control of your own health. Um,
Yeah, it's empowerment, and that's what I've always done with all the different therapies. It's empowerment. It's a case of I'm not anti-medication whatsoever, as I said, and it's just a case of if you got a headache, you got something you can go and take, and if you've stung yourself, like if you're wandering around with a child, you can use plantain if they've been stung, or if they've been bitten, or sort of bee sting or wasp sting. It's something you can easily do, and you kind of take control of your life. And I love teaching people to forage because it's getting them outside in nature. And once you get that connection, people are outside more, they're in the trees more, which improves your immune system. They're getting more exercise, they're connecting more, they're taking healthier stuff. It kind of changes their life. You can see their light kind of come on about empowerment and taking control of their own health and happiness. I just love it.
yeah, it's interesting when you were talking about just going out to the car park, and just finding stuff, because for the last 44, I guess 43, because it happened last year. For the last 43 years, I've been like walking by plantain my whole life. It was in
Oh
my
yeah.
yard. It was in my, like you said, in driveways and parking lots, things like that. And then once I learned to identify, I was like, this thing is so amazing. This
Oh,
one plant.
it's fabulous, that plant. It's a first aid kit. It's an absolute first aid kit. If you've got a sore throat, make it into a tea, gargle with it, you're done. If you've cut yourself or if you've got an infection, you can use it. If you've been bitten or stung or anything, it's just brilliant.
And so prevalent too. So it's,
Yes.
especially on the East Coast. I don't know too much about the West Coast where I am now. I'll have to keep an eye out for it, but it's so prevalent from where I'm from that I was just like, I can't believe it. Like I never thought about it. And dandelions, obviously, I've always known the name of dandelions because they're everywhere. But
Yeah.
just the amazing, I mean, I had dandelion tea this morning. And so
Awesome.
being able to like start recognizing, like you said, those little things that you might find, I would never pick, like you said, any of that stuff in where the cars are, but going a
Yeah.
little further away.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good
Never
stuff
pick by the side
frozen.
of the road.
Yes.
Or never pick where a dog can pee. Imagine the biggest dog and just pick beyond that.
Yes. And it's amazing how many good things grow right on those ditches near the side of the road.
Yeah, you kind of drive past, you're like, that's amazing mugwort. Oh my gosh, that's great. That's fantastic. I'm not touching it though.
Right?
It's just full of toxins.
So many toxins. So awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been fabulous to talk to you and
Thank you.
hints, and I can't wait to kind of make that honey. I
Oh,
have some
do.
raw, I have some raw honey that I picked up when I was in Arizona that I might just do that with.
You can use all sorts, honestly. If you use lavender though, use half as much lavender and only do it for 2 weeks. Otherwise, it becomes really lavendery, which is a bit medicinal. But if you only do it for 2 weeks and with slightly less, it's got a real nice floral sense to it. And again, calming, relaxing, fabulous.
Can you do it once it's crystallized? Like, because the raw
You
honey
would,
crystallizes quickly.
if you put it in some very warm water and then just keep stirring it until it redoes, sort of get runny again, fill it back up, and then stir it regularly. And then if you're going to strain it again,
Warm
just
it.
warm it until it becomes runny, not too hot, otherwise you're pasteurizing it again, but and then you can strain it out. But yeah,
Oh,
I've got a fantastic local honey guy. And last time he came up to me and he said, I don't know what they've been eating, but it's gone real weird. And it was these big crystals. He said, if you want it warm, and if you want it runny, just warm it. It did, it went, but it was really chewy and delicious. But he's like, we don't know what it's been eating.
well, and that's why they say honey's so good for you, for especially the hay fever, right? Because it's picking up the pollen from the local plants and the flowers.
Yeah.
And yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much. I know I said thank you like 3 times now.
No,
I'm
thank you.
like,
I
"Oh,
keep
you're
starting
not
talking again. I told you,
supposed
once I
to."
get started on herbs, I'm like, hey.
It's just so exciting because it's accessible to everybody. And I
Yeah.
love that you talked about, like, even in, like, you could find it in cities, you can find it everywhere. And obviously you want to make sure it's okay before, especially, I don't know what kind of stipulations are for the UK, but here in the US, you really want to make sure that if you're picking somewhere that's not your land, that you steward, that you have asked permission to pick there.
Yeah, the UK, if it's on private land, you have to have private plan person's permission. If it's on council land, because a lot of land in the UK is council land, you are allowed in theory to pick it, but there's this there's been a rise of foraging for restaurants in the UK. It's become really popular and fashionable for restaurants to go out foraging, which they're not technically meant to do, because you're not meant to forage for financial gain. So you're not meant to sell what you forage. So there are some councils starting to lock down and say, no, you can't forage in this area. But I'm really lucky. I've been speaking to the rangers near here, and they're like, yeah, we want people to forage. We want people to connect. So I'm working with them to sort of do walks and that kind of thing in here. But yeah, you've got to be a bit careful. Make sure the rules where you are.
Yes, yeah, and also be careful when you go to those restaurants that do forage, that they know what they're doing.
Yeah,
But
they
the
normally do in
school
the UK, but yeah.
the school I went to in, Vermont had said that they had somebody come who was a chef, and they were foraging, and they went out, and they weren't supposed to be picking or doing anything, they were just kinda out on the land, and they picked mushrooms and ate them, and they were poisonous. And they were like, "Oh,
Oh,
these are what we use in the restaurant." And it was like, "Oh, no, they're not." They were okay.
oh
They got
gosh.
very sick and had to go to the hospital, but they were okay, or
Mm.
after getting sick and stuff like that. But you really just have to know what you're doing. Like you said, things on the
Especially mushrooms.
yeah,
Especially mushrooms. Mushrooms are a real speciality. I mean, I think they look pretty, but I don't touch the mushrooms. It's
yeah.
a specialist knowledge.
I always, if I'm with somebody that I know knows their stuff, I will pick them. And yeah, but I won't do it on my own. I have a book
Oh,
so I can practice, like you said, like really practicing identification without picking, and just taking that time to really get to know what you see
yeah,
and be like, oh, wait, this one has jagged line or serrated edge. This one has
yeah,
this berry coming out that's like a reddish berry, but the leaf looks different than this one with the red berry, right? Like being
yeah.
able to really, and one of the things that somebody suggested to me that might be helpful for your class too is to bring, and you might do this, bring a sketchbook and they draw out the plant of what they see. So they're really connecting the visual with
That's
their
interesting.
hand eye. And so it helps
Yeah.
them really like internalize it.
I like that. That's nice. I think a lot of people take photos with their phone, but I love that kind of that real connection. Maybe my next course should be coming and sketching, and they can start sketching and forage rather than just looking and picking and making things. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It helps for identification because you have to look so closely at like, what does that edge look like? And
Yeah. That's the whole thing about knowing your herbs and your plants is what is the edge, where do the veins go, where what's the color, what does the underneath, what the stem look like.
yeah, so fantastic. Well, I can't wait to like explore your website too a little bit more. I did take a look at
Fantastic,
it,
thank
but
you.
I look forward to hearing more about what you do. And are you on social media at all?
I am Facebook and Instagram. I will pass over those links for you. I'm always posting where I've been, what I've been doing, what I've been picking, what I'm doing with it, dehydrating it, making honey with it, whatever.
Oh, great. Well, for all you listeners, make sure you follow Margaret to see
Yeah, I
more
do.
about what
Thank you.
she's doing. And thank you for being on
And
Think.
message me and say hi and say what you're doing, because I love hearing back from people what they're doing and stuff and making. And at Christmas time, I had somebody come around with this big bunch of goodies that they'd made after doing my courses. They're like, we were so inspired. Here's some of this, and here's some of this, and we made some of this, and we just wanted to give you some, which I was just like, oh my God, that's just, yeah, my heart just grew like 10 sizes.
Yeah, you're doing amazing work because this work, as you share it, right, and other people are diving into it, it's just going to spread,
A bit like you,
right?
connecting back with nature. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it all intertwines. It's so great.
Brilliant.
So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time, and hi to everybody, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Take care.